at the end of the day, these people are going to be found guilty because, there's no reason why they should not be. We're talking about this PNB Rock murder case, and I had already shot a video before the district attorney filed charges, but last week, the LA County District Attorney's Office filed charges in this case. And so we're going to go through the facts of that case, facts of the complaint, and I'm going to just give you my thoughts on the case in general, how I see this thing playing out. And, it's going to be a bit of a different perspective. I'm sure you've seen this story being reported on the news, hear a lot of hip hop blogs, entertainment channels talking about this situation. But, I do bring a different perspective. I am a criminal defense attorney. I'm in my 14th year of practicing criminal defense, and, I've seen it all. Any type of case that you can think of, for the most part, I've dealt with, whether that's white collar crime, whether that's, major federal drug conspiracies, homicide cases, attempted murders, assault crimes, just everything across the board. I've handled in my career. And so, again, it's just a different perspective in terms of listening to the facts of these cases and then kind of giving that perspective that you really could only get from a defense attorney. And then, just on top of that, when we're talking about a hip hop artist, a rapper, I'm very much in tune with the culture. I mean, that is, that's my heart. You see these black cases in the background there. Those are my turntables. So I DJ turntables, mixers. I think I got a controller back there. So you're very much in tune with the culture. So there's a nice mix of things that, make me who I am and lead to the perspective and the take that I have on these things. So let's go ahead and get into these details. So again, the LA County District Attorney's Office, they filed a complaint last week. And so, the way these things work is the police, they're going to get, the tip off that something like this ended up happening. So I assume someone, a Roscoe's employee or even a guest, ended up calling 911 after the shots were fired, or even during the confrontation, because we're going to hear some of the details of what was said to PNB Rock during this situation. So at some point, the urgent nature of the situation is going to prompt somebody to call 911, right? And so the police are then going to respond. They're going to have their team processing the scene. When we're talking about a murder situation, they're going to be processing the scene, doing their investigation, and they're going to be going around and asking witnesses what happened. So, all those employees at Roscoe's, the cashiers, the hostess, the hosts, the greeters, the waiters. I'm forgetting about what who employees are at a restaurant. But they're going to ask everybody. They're going to ask, people who were there dining, anybody who saw something, heard something. They're going to get all the witness statements that they can. They're also going to be taking photographs. They're going to be shooting video of the scene in order to capture everything that they can. All that information ends up getting turned over to the district attorney's office. And there is what is called an issuing DA, so an issuing district attorney. And usually you're going to have different divisions within a district attorney's office. So you're going to have the narcotics division. You're going to have the violent crimes division, where this case would likely land. You're going to have, a family protection unit, and that covers domestic violence type situations. You're going to have a gang unit, or even this case probably fell under homicide. If, certain jurisdictions will have a separate homicide unit, but if it's a smaller jurisdiction, a smaller district attorney's office, they may not have that as separate and apart from violent crimes. But nonetheless, there's going to be and bear in mind the actual district attorney. So within the district attorney's office, you have all these attorneys who are considered deputy district attorneys, but then there's the actual elected district attorney. And in a case like this, he's gonna be involved in the decision making in this type of case. When you have a high profile media type case, he's going to be involved in the decision making. But nonetheless, there's going to be what's called an issuing district attorney who then goes through the facts from all the information that's presented by the police. And then they're going to make a decision as to what charges are going to be filed. And they're going to be the ones who ultimately draft the complaint. And the complaint is going to, in this situation, there was a factual statement submitted along with the complaint. So complaints, which at their core, they're going to list the defendant's name. So the person who's being charged with the crime is going to list their date of birth, and then it's going to have the specific offenses with which they're being charged. They may or may not have details about the actual facts that led to the charges, but in this particular situation, there was a factual statement in that complaint. And so we're going to kind of go through the details of what was in that complaint. And essentially it starts that on September 12th of this year, there was a man wearing a red shirt who observed the victim. So PNB Rock, his real name was Rakim Allen. And this man wearing the red shirt observed PNB Rock enter the Roscoe's. And he was wearing jewelry that was valued at several hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I imagine that valuation probably came from the girlfriend. They say that this individual was waiting outside of the Roscoe's until Freddie Lee Trone arrives. All right. So the man in the red shirt and Freddie Lee Trone are talking outside for a short period of time, and then Trone leaves. Then a short time later, Trone comes back with his 17-year-old son. And because the son is a minor, so he's under 18, his name has not been released, and it'll likely be some time before we hear what his actual name is. But it is stated that Trone's son, the minor, was armed with a gun. And so Trone had dropped off his son a short distance from the Roscoe's. And so he's, just a couple blocks away, I believe, from the Roscoe's, and the minor then walks inside of the Roscoe's. And without any hesitation, he goes directly up to Mr. Allen. And Mr. Allen at that point was eating with his girlfriend. So they're both, enjoying a meal, at which point the minor goes directly to Allen, points a gun at him, and says, "Give me all of your jewelry now." And right after that, the minor then shoots Allen in the chest while his girlfriend is sitting there at the table. And if you can only imagine just how traumatic of a situation that would be to, see your boyfriend get shot in the chest. Allen then falls to the ground, and the minor then shoots Allen 2 more times in his back. And so the minor then directs his attention to the girlfriend, saying, "Show me your hands. Give me that blank right now." I imagine you said, "Give me that shit right now. I swear to God, I'll shoot you in the head." And the minor then robbed the girlfriend and took her jewelry. Meanwhile, Allen's, PNB Rock is laying on the ground, dying essentially. And the minor at this point took his chains, his watch, and even the rings from his fingers. Then his father, Freddie Lee Trone, returns to the Roscoe's, picks up his son, and they drive away. They make it a few blocks away, and they stop, and the minor basically throws away his shoes and shirt. Presumably there's blood and all kinds of DNA and just evidence on his shoes and shirt, and so he throws those away. Interestingly enough, at least from what I understand, there's no mention whatsoever of the girlfriend having posted on IG the location, or posting on IG the picture of the food and tagging the location. So it may very well be that posting had nothing to do whatsoever with what ended up leading to what happened. And it is my understanding, you can't quote me on this, but I did hear that there were other robberies in the area. So this just could have been one more in a string of these robberies. I'm not sure on that, but nonetheless, I mean, this was a big thing. This had caused a lot of controversy as to whether, the girlfriends having posted this, was what led to the death. But it doesn't seem as though, at least at this point, that that connection is being made in connection with this complaint. Nonetheless, the police department, they're going to continue to investigate. They are continuing to investigate, and they're still looking for the man who was wearing the red shirt. And so, when it comes to this guy, he's facing some serious time. I believe that he would be, an accessory at the very minimum. But, he likely would end up being another co-conspirator, facing, a serious amount of time as well, in addition to Mr. Trone and his son. And so, again, I just want to sincerely, again, say rest in peace to Rakim Allen, better known as PNB Rock. My heart goes out to his family, his loved ones, his fans. And, to be quite honest with you, this story just absolutely breaks my heart. Listen, PNB Rock was only 30 years old. He was just so young. Even for me, 30 years old just feels so long ago. And I have colleagues who call me a baby, you know what I mean? And I'm 42. But 30 just, 30, your life is barely starting. And, in fact, last night, me and my homie, we went to go see, Wu-Tang Clan, Nas, and Busta Rhymes. And, I got my Iron Man. I got the Iron Man, album cover back there. I'm a hip hop head. And, the reality is these guys, most of them are at least 50 years old. I think Nas might be 49 years old, but everybody else on that roster, the whole Wu-Tang Clan, Busta Rhymes, is 50 plus. And you see these guys out there and killing it, and with their discography being able to pull from records from the 90s, from the 2000s, 2010s, 2020 now at this point. Again, I don't want to get too far off topic. That show was ridiculous, though. I don't want to get too off topic, but 30 years old is just so young. He had his whole life ahead of him, and really it comes down to a life being senselessly taken just over jewelry. And it really saddens me that life can just be looked at as so cheap, just the sheer lack of value placed on life, that one could just take another man's life in such a way. And that's just the reality. I mean, if you're like me, you love your shoot 'em up, bang bang music, gritty, grimy gangster rap. But that's just entertainment, just like movies, just like we love Casino and we love The Godfather, Godfather 2, Godfather 3, not so much, but it's entertainment, right? It's not, it's not in real life. Nobody really loves to see people losing their lives, especially, again, as senselessly as this. But really, two of the things that just jumped out at me at this story is just, number one, how this father got his young son involved. And then number two, how, just how cold of a heart this young man had to have in order to carry out this armed robbery and murder in this way. And you might be thinking that, hey, you're a criminal defense attorney. Like, why are you talking this way? The reality is, chances are you probably don't know a criminal defense attorney, right? And you may not even personally know an attorney at all. So this may be the closest or most intimate talk you would ever have the opportunity to hear about this topic. But make no mistake about it, we are human, right? We have feelings, and we empathize and we sympathize with situations. We have a job to carry out, just like the prosecutor, just like the judge. We as defense attorneys, we play a role in the system And even when we defend people who are charged with the most egregious and nasty of crimes, such as this, just me as a fellow criminal defense attorney and looking at this situation, it's still, I don't know, there's no other way to put it. I do have, feelings and I care about society and life and everything. And so, I just want to bring that out that, yes, I mean, this is just a sad situation. There are so many lives that are now essentially thrown away at this point because of this situation. And it really just is sad. And I was really thinking about, when you have this 17-year-old kid who carried out, again, this armed robbery and murder in this way, he just really had to be in such a dark space in order to be able to do that. And so I have just every reason to believe that the DA will ultimately seek to try this guy as an adult. So he's only 17, so he's a minor still, but I believe that he will be tried as an adult. And there's a number of factors that end up getting weighed in the decision of trying a minor as an adult. And one of the major ones is just the seriousness of the offense. And like I said, it just really doesn't get more serious than this situation, again, where a young man walks into an establishment, proceeds directly to the victim, demands the jewelry, shoots him nonetheless. So it would have been one thing to have a gun and demand the jewelry, take the jewelry, and then leave. But no, to demand the jewelry, then shoot, then, as the guy's on the ground, shoot him in the back twice, and then take the jewelry. Actually, before that, then, rob the girlfriend and then take the decedent's jewelry. That just, that level of seriousness, I really couldn't see why the district attorney would not try him as an adult. And so here we're left in a situation with a father who will spend the rest of his life in prison. I'd imagine that the son would likely spend the rest of his life in prison, or at the very least be very, very old when he gets out. So again, PNB Rock's life, Rakim Allen's life taken away. These two gentlemen, their lives essentially thrown away. Who knows what could have became of this young man who's now, facing these murder charges and will be fighting for his life in court. But, just to think of this man, Freddie Lee Trone, and thinking about where his head and where his heart have to have been in order to bring his own flesh and blood into this situation. His son, only 17 years old. We know that the gentleman in the red shirt ended up calling Freddie Lee Trone, who then comes to the scene and then leaves to go get his son. And then the son carries out the armed robbery and murder. Listen, when you're robbing somebody, right? When you're robbing somebody at gunpoint, anything can happen. Anything can happen in a robbery. I mean, let's just think, what if PNB Rock was strapped? What if PNB Rock had a gun on him and killed this young man? What if PNB Rock's girlfriend had a gun on her and ended up killing this young man? I mean, really, the worst possible situation for a parent is for your son or daughter to lose their lives, right? There's that whole idea that a parent should never have to bury their child. And the next probably worst situation, I guess, if you throw in the mix a major illness, would be your son or daughter finding themselves locked up and losing their freedom. Right. And so that is what the son is now facing. He very well could have been shot and killed himself. That didn't happen. But the next worst thing is happening where he stands to lose his freedom potentially forever. And I think that then brings up just the often debated topic, like, are we products of our environment, or are our lives the results of the decisions that we make? Right. We have this constant debate that, we're, personal responsibility versus being the products of our environment. And I tend to believe that it is a mixture of both. But what I believe is that people will oftentimes underestimate. They vastly underestimate the level that one's environment, the level of influence that one's environment has on them. And I can tell you, my late father used to tell me, and it used to annoy the heck out of me. He used to tell me, watch who you hang around with. And I would get upset when he would tell me that, because I felt like he was criticizing my friends. I felt like he was criticizing the company that I kept at the time, because he was just really adamant about that message. Watch who you hang around with, son. Watch who you keep around you. And, that's how I felt back then. I was a little upset about it. I didn't like it. I think it stayed in the back of my mind. But then as I continued to evolve, as I continued to grow and just mature, and then diving into, let's say, self-help and personal development type books and everything. And then you hear the saying that you are the average of the 5 people you hang around with the most. And you come to find out that's very true, in terms of your fitness, your financial situation, your spending habits, and your education, your goals, and all these type of things. You are going to end up being the average of the people that you spend the most time with. And the reality is, I keep very few people around me. And realistically, if I give you the gift of my time, it's because I believe that you are truly worth it. And, and the reality is, it is very precious to me. Time is precious to me. And I also understand that there is going to be some rubbing off. Some of me is going to rub off you, and some of you is going to rub off on me. And I got to protect what I have going on. I have to protect what's up here. So that's why I have to be very vigilant about who I keep around me. So even though I hated when my dad used to tell me that, I ended up realizing that was very, very sound advice. So when we think of this concept, we're usually talking about, friends and associates, the company that you keep. But what about when that negative influence is your very own father? What about, when it is your father who is putting your life at risk, either putting your life at risk or putting your freedom for the rest of your life at risk? When your father is the person who gives you the details on who you're going to rob, right? Picks you up, has you do it, drops you off. At 17 years old, this kid, again, this minor who has committed this horrific atrocity, is 17 years old. And when you're 17 years old, your father is supposed to be picking you up from football practice, from band practice, or some after school program, not taking you to rob and kill somebody. And I don't want to get too far off of this topic, but this is a situation sometimes when you see kids fall into juvenile offenses, and typically speaking, they are going to go through the juvenile program versus the adult court, because the thought is that there's still time to rehabilitate a kid who's kind of veered off the positive path, but there's still a possibility of saving them before they commit a level of an offense that's going to land them in adult prison and, stuck in a web that they just can't get out of. Right. But unfortunately, sometimes that first offense is the worst type of offense that you could possibly commit. And that's what we have here. I mean, it doesn't really get much worse than that. An armed robbery leading to a murder. And so the complaint has been filed. They should have been arraigned by now. And really what will end up happening, just in a nutshell in this case, is that, it will likely end up going to a preliminary hearing. And so a preliminary hearing is a probable cause hearing. All right. And so in a felony charge, you have the right to have the government, so the district attorney, you have the right to have them put on the evidence to show that there's a crime that's been committed, and if you are the accused, that you were the one who committed the crime. And the reason for that is to make sure that there's at least enough evidence there to hold you to answer for trial, right? So we're making sure that we're not having people face felony charges when there is no evidence whatsoever, right? And so it'll go through that preliminary hearing process, which will end up being probably a few officers going in and testifying as to, what they saw, probably statements that different witnesses gave to them, because they probably won't end up calling the actual witnesses themselves. They'll just have the police testify as to what those witnesses told them. The defense will probably stipulate to, any of the medical examiner testimony that would be necessary to establish that Mr. Allen died and how he died, because you generally need an expert to be able to testify to that. So they'll probably stipulate to that. There's no reason to hold the DA to actually call a medical examiner to testify to that. But yeah, it'll go through that process, and then the judge will hold, Mr. Trone and his son. He'll hold them to answer to these charges. And in terms of negotiation, a case like this is different from just your run-of-the-mill case, because generally speaking, once a person gets charged with a crime, the DA is going to turn over the evidence to the defense attorney. And then the defense attorney obviously has an opportunity to go through the evidence themselves. They're probably going to have their own investigator look into things that they need to have done. So have them interview witnesses and do whatever, the defense needs to do as part of their investigation. But typically in your run-of-the-mill case, the district attorney, after turning over the evidence, they'll make an offer, right? And so the offer typically is going to be better than what you would end up facing if you were to go to trial and lose. But when you have a case like this, a case that's this serious, the DA tends to not make any offer at all. And the only way, so when we're talking about an offer, so the DA would make an offer, and then if the defense accepts the offer, that would then end up being a change of plea. So you're in your arraignment, your plea is not guilty. And so when you hear the words change of plea, that's a person changing their plea from not guilty to guilty. And so when you hear, these buzzwords about taking a deal, pleading guilty, that's what we're talking about, resolving the case. So rather than to hold the government to put the case in front of a jury as in the form of a trial, you're just going to accept guilt and plead guilty. All right. But that usually comes as a result of back and forth negotiations. So like I said, in a normal case, the DA will make an offer, but in a case like this, the DA will not make an offer. And so the defense, if they want to possibly settle the case, the defense actually has to come to the table and propose an offer. And realistically, I think when it comes to the father, and I don't know what his criminal history is, I'm always going to assume someone has no criminal history unless and until, otherwise evidence is otherwise presented. So assuming that he has no criminal history, still, I imagine the DA is not going to accept anything except a life sentence for the father. And I think that's going to be in large part just because the level of just cold and callous planning of this robbery and using the son, right? And even though, perhaps you could say the father had no way of knowing that his son was actually going to shoot Rakim Allen, It's going to be one of those things where they say, hey, when we're dealing with armed robbery, anything can happen, and that's just the risk of participating in armed robberies. There's a chance that somebody could get shot and killed. Again, it could have been his son. So his son could have been shot and killed, but it happened to be Mr. Allen who ended up getting shot and killed. But I think that's going to be something that the DA just is not going to back down at all. And realistically, the DA is absolutely in the stronger negotiating or bargaining position, right? Because the DA will be a lot more flexible in cases where the evidence is not quite as strong. Right. So in situations where you have shaky eyewitness testimony, or you just have a less than credible witness, or you have a very evasive alleged victim. So the alleged victim doesn't want to participate in the process. And that's going to make the DA's case harder than they otherwise would think it would be. Those are the types of things that will end up making or prompting the DA to perhaps back down on such an aggressive stance. But if they feel like, they have a relatively open and shut case, which this seems to pretty much be, then, they don't have to be flexible in their negotiations, and they really won't likely be. And so realistically, in terms of this minor child in this situation, his defense attorney would end up having to propose an offer, if they're going to propose any offer at all. It may just be that they decide that they'll go straight to trial without making any offers. But assuming that they want to, try, that offer from the defense would end up having to be, some sort of offer that has him getting out of prison, very late in his adult years, really in order for the DA to entertain it and take it seriously. So, and just to think about it from a practical, just real world, real life standpoint, that tends to be difficult, especially when you're dealing with somebody who has no criminal history. So I've had these conversations before. You're going into the jail, you're sitting down with your client, you're going over the evidence with them, and you're talking about potential settlement. It's like, because we're either going to go to trial on this case, or we're going to reach some sort of agreement and settle this case. But when you're telling somebody with no criminal history, you're telling them, hey, the DA is not making you any offers because they have a 25 to life case. They have a 35 to life case. They have a 50 years to life case if you get convicted in front of a jury, and they have every reason to believe that you will be convicted. And so if they have that strong of a position, then when we're coming to the table with an offer, it's not like you can offer 10 years. It's not like you can offer, 20 years. Realistically, in a situation like that, you're talking about, multiple decade offers, maybe, 30, 40 years or something like that, in order for the DA to take an offer seriously. And so because that's really hard for a person to accept, a person with no criminal history just signing up for a 30, 40 year deal, then by default, if the defense and the DA just can't reach an agreement, then that's a case that, has to go to trial by definition. And so when it does go to trial, again, that's just going to be because there's no other choice. Any case in which the district attorney and the defense can't come to an agreement, that has to go to trial. But when it goes to trial, I'll just say if and when it goes to trial, more when than if, right? When it goes to trial, it's not going to be because the defense believes, it's not going to be because the defense attorneys believe that there's some sort of realistic shot at them being acquitted. It's going to go to trial because there's no other choice. And so that trial, because what I want is for people to understand, number one, that first fact that the defense attorneys aren't going to trial thinking that, they're going to get their client off of these charges, but it'll end up being a situation that it's just the system having to play itself out because, number one, again, no agreement was able to be reached. And then the other point that I wanted to make is that you shouldn't ultimately criticize these individuals for taking their case to trial. That is their right. That is their constitutional right to put a case in front of a jury. If the government decides they are going to accuse an individual in this country, if they're going to accuse somebody of a crime, then the government and the government alone has the burden of proving that you did what they say you did. And that's what we want. We want to have a trial by jury. We don't want the government to just be able to say, hey, you did this, you murdered this person, or you robbed this bank, or you sold these drugs, or you did these drugs, or you were under the influence of alcohol. We don't want the government to just have that level of power. So that's the importance of a trial by jury and this whole process and the checks and balances. So I want you to be careful and mindful of criticizing people for exercising their right to go to trial. I want you to be mindful and not criticize just the process of going to trial. At the end of the day, these people are going to be found guilty because, there's no reason why they should not be. If you go and you enter an establishment and you rob somebody and you shoot them, then what else would you think should happen in that situation? And again, I can, some people will say, well, wow, now you sound like a prosecutor. No, I sound like a logically thinking human being who just happens to be a defense attorney. So if this case somehow came across my desk, for other reasons, I'm not certain whether I would take it. But if for whatever reason, I was appointed this case, right? Because I've been in private practice my whole career as a defense attorney, but I have served as a public defender of sorts in that I would take appointed cases. And so even though I'm a private defense attorney, I would serve as a public defender. And I didn't, really pick and choose which cases came across my desk. I actually represented a white supremacist at some point in my career, right? And I've talked about that before, but it's kind of a, funny dynamic. But the reality is you take the case that you're appointed and you give it your all. You zealously advocate for your client to make sure that the system does what it is supposed to do. And so in this situation, again, they will go to trial. They have a right to trial, and they are innocent unless and until they are proven guilty. And so we don't need to be questioning that at all. We've seen how many people do we have in our jails and prisons who are wrongfully convicted? We hear about all these convictions being overturned, and that's what the standard of innocent until proven guilty. I mean, could you imagine if we had a standard of guilty until proven innocent, right? If the standard was guilty until you prove your innocence, that changes everything. If you had to actually come up with proof that you were innocent of a crime, otherwise, by default, you were found guilty, that would just be horrendous. And there are systems to this day in this world that operate like that. And thank God we're not in a country that operates that way. But yeah, that's my thoughts on this case. Again, tragic story all around. I want to offer my thoughts and prayers and condolences to the family, to his friends, to his loved ones, to his fans. That's going to be it for now. But I am curious as to your thoughts. Let me know what you think. This is, a bit longer, a lot longer than the videos I'm used to putting out. But maybe I'll go for this more, long form type situation. But please, give me your thoughts. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, on the video, thoughts on the case. If you have any questions, I'm be happy to answer them. If they're really good, I might do a video on them. But that's going to be it for now. So if you got something out of this, please show me some love and hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on those notifications so you never miss a new video when it drops. As always, I want to thank you so much for watching. And until next time, peace.